It's 3 a.m. on a workday. The city sleeps. The silence is only broken by the mechanical clicking of an old typewriter. Dmitry Alexeyevich has been working another long night, as he usually does. While translation isn't exactly an exciting field, something has taken a keen interest in his current commission. Dmitry doesn't know it yet, but it's waiting outside of his apartment. Dmitry stops typing. It's way too late for a visit. The soundscape changes. He can hear the water droplets in the kitchen sink and the dogs howling on the street. Since when did stray dogs start venturing to this part of Moscow? He wonders. It's not the police, that's obvious. Dmitry gets up and turns off the lights in the apartment. He can't decide whether he should be scared or embarrassed by his paranoia. Slowly, his eyes get used to the dark and he approaches the door. He catches a glimpse of the visitor through a peephole. The hallway is dark and he can't make out any details except that the proportions are not really human. Too tall, with shoulders too wide. A caricature of a man. A creation of a demented god that forgot how humans are supposed to look. As the end times reach the Russian Federation, Dmitry will get more visits. They will only stop once he realizes something that should have been obvious from the start. That God has a name and an address. Yuri Andreevich Knorosov, living in Moscow, Itsamny Street, 23. Some of you might be familiar with the works of Dmitry Glukhovsky. He is the author of Metro 2033, a famous book series that was made into an even more famous video game franchise. But Metro is just a fraction of his work. Sumерки is not for everyone, partially because it's really weird, and partially because there is no English translation. Luckily, there is me, who will give you a summary and talk about some world-shattering personal takes in the end. Mr. Glukhovsky, if you're watching this, the signature you gave me is somehow even worse than the one on your Wikipedia page. FSB, if you're watching this, I obtained this signature when I was but a little sloveling, before Mr. Glukhovsky was declared an enemy of the state. You, the viewer, if you're watching this, please subscribe. Now regarding the plot. The protagonist of the book is named Dmitry Alexeyevich. Divorced, middle-aged, no kids, and you won't get to know him much better than that. Instead of dumping his entire life at the reader, Dmitry will instead describe a lot of the small things in his day-to-day experience. What food he cooks, when he makes tea, at what time in the morning he closes the curtains and goes to sleep. A very important part of his life is where he lives. Even though he makes just enough money to scrape by, his apartment is located in the Arbat Street, which is one of the most prestigious places in Moscow. He lives in a neoclassical apartment from the Stalinist era. These are rare, have tall ceilings and go for a lot of money on the property market. But the apartment Dmitry owns is not for sale. He inherited the place from his late grandmother, the old furniture being an eternal reminder of her existence. Dmitry is stuck in the past, and nowhere is it more obvious than in his disdain towards technology. He doesn't own a computer or a mobile phone. All his work is done on a typewriter, and when he needs to make a call, he uses a landline. The world is moving forward at a record speed, while Dmitry is stuck. At the translating agency, there is no more work for him. Every commission in English or French is already taken. The only thing available are some documents in Spanish. He doesn't actually do Spanish commissions, but has to accept nonetheless. The bills won't pay themselves. The material seems to be very old and titled Chapter 2. The agency's go-to Spanish translator has been stuck on Chapter 1 for quite some time, which isn't a good sign. Dmitry immediately realizes why this might be. This is Old Spanish, from the 16th century. Some of these words aren't even included in his dictionary. The night sets and Dmitry gets to work. The document is a diary of a Spanish conquistador. He is a member of an expedition organized by Diego de Landa, a real bishop that became the key figure in the eradication of Mayan culture in the 16th century. Diego de Landa set it as his life goal to replace the Mayan deities with the cross in all of Yucatan. In the process, he ventured to the frontiers, and today his work serves as the prime source for what we know about the indigenous culture of the region. It's not like there is much competition, since the last remains of Mayan culture he documented were also destroyed, at his own command. But before he could burn the idols, they needed to be retrieved. This is where our conquistador came in. His task was to secure the manuscripts and bring them to the bishop. He was told that if the mission fails, the Spanish risk a Mayan uprising. The rest of the expedition, that being more than 50 soldiers, 3 native guides and a monk, were left in the blind. This especially worries the native members of the mission, who fear that their journey might enrage the gods. Yucatan is a hostile place. They were advised to avoid major routes in order to maintain secrecy. The road slowly morphs into a path, and the path gives way to a fake jungle. Carriages can't continue, and it's ultimately decided that the group will split in half. One half is to stay at a campsite built around a pagan shrine. The other one is to continue on foot. Our conquistador leads the latter. It's a slow crawl, and as the day is coming to an end, they get stopped by a river, engorged by rainfall. The native guides are surprised since such heavy rains tend to take place only during the wet season. A thunderstorm comes with the night, and one of the soldiers is struck dead by lightning. The unfortunate event, combined with the lack of clarity regarding the purpose of the expedition, creates a breeding ground for rumors. Is this a sign from the Mayan gods, whose territory is being disturbed? The conquistador and the monk make a clear point that any blasphemy will be punished severely. The following day they return to the original campsite, but there is no trace of those who have been left behind. Searching through the surrounding jungle, the conquistador makes a worrying discovery. The pagan shrine, which served as a waypoint, is now covered in blood. A human heart freshly taken out of someone's body now decorates the statue. For the first time in years, Dmitry is excited by a commission. He got so used to translating motorcycle manuals and other purely informative gibberish that this doesn't even feel like working. To his disappointment, once he returns to the agency, there is no part 3. All the work he gets is labeling for cigars and raisins. The client, as well as the Spanish translator who worked on chapter 1, are not answering the agency's calls. Dmitry gets home disappointed. He isn't quite ready to leave the Mayans behind, and buys every book he manages to find on the subject. The author of this book is good at accurately describing everyday life. That is, he is capable of boring the reader. It's definitely not for everyone, but it serves a very specific purpose. Amidst all the noise of mundane activities, some things slip through. Dmitry is listening to the radio, which casually mentions tsunamis in Asia with the deaths in the hundreds of thousands. The next time Dmitry returns to the agency, chapter 3 is already waiting for him. Him specifically. The customer is very happy with the translation of the second chapter. Dmitry doesn't waste time and that night gets back to work. Our conquistador agreed with the monk that the soldiers shouldn't learn the truth. The official version of events was that the other half of the expedition headed back to civilization. The journey was complicated by the fact that no village was willing to host the Spaniards. One night they were attacked by the natives, and even though they emerged victorious, their crew shrunk to around 20 people. The conquistador forms a bond with the native guide Juan Cocom, who explains the hostility they encountered. The mission entered sacred and forbidden territory. Coming here with ill intentions towards the gods is blasphemous to the natives. Those who attacked them belonged to a tribe from the north that once served a powerful dynasty. But after their empire fell, they found new masters in these forbidden lands. It's better to pray to Jesus that whoever they serve is human. Dmitry is hooked. He finishes the translation in no time and rushes to the agency. Chapter 4 is already waiting for him. His boss takes interest in the commission due to its high pay, unusual content and the mysterious customer, but Dmitry feels an urge to keep the document hidden. For whatever reason, he doesn't want anyone except him and the customer to read the conquistador's story. Dmitry's already terrible sleep schedule slowly falls apart even further, as he focuses all his life energy onto the translation. The expedition continues through a swamp. Juan Cocom tells the conquistador that if the aggressive tribe doesn't attack them, it's nothing to celebrate. The northern Maya are known for their bravery, and if they didn't follow the Spaniards, then it's only because the swamp is an especially evil place. Two soldiers fall victim to a creature hiding beneath the water surface. Another one is heard screaming, never to be seen again. After getting out of the swamp, the soldiers start celebrating and thanking their native guides. But one of the guides has the exact opposite reaction. When the full weight of where he led the expedition sets in, he starts begging them to turn around. His pleading goes unanswered, and after a night of heavy drinking, the soldiers find him hanging from a tree, leaving the mission with only one person who knows the way: Juan Cocom. Dmitry finishes the page and thinks about what could force the guide to take his own life. An extreme sin according to the Christians. What would force someone to turn his back on the gentle smile of Mother Mary and instead hear the call of those uncanny faces carved into the stone shrines? Dmitry is no longer describing his meals in detail, because there isn't much to describe. The translation is taking over his life. He overhears the radio broadcast. Haiti, Cuba, and the Dominican Republic had their capital cities completely destroyed due to earthquakes. Yet he doesn't give it much thought. Much more worrying for him is that the next chapter is not waiting for him at the agency. There is no word from the customer. Dmitry fills the free time he has with searching more about the Maya. He finds a strange book being sold at a street vendor that goes into quite some depth about the conquest of Yucatan. But even after a couple of days, there is no word from the customer. The last time Dmitry meets with the agency boss, the old man's behavior is anything but typical. He is worried about Dmitry, but instead of maintaining eye contact, his eyes drift to the hallway as if someone was in the agency with them. He says that there will be no more commissions from the customer. The agency's Spanish translator who worked on the first chapter is now officially missing. It's not helping that, just like Dmitry, the Spanish translator was also living alone. The police found his apartment empty but not robbed. The only thing missing was the commission. For the first time in the book, Dmitry breaks character. Usually he keeps his head down, but this time he decides to take a stand and interrogate the agency's owner. I see where you're coming from, sir. The good name of the company is at stake, and God forbid, you could even, lose your job. To hell with my job. The old man, by that I mean our customer, forbade me from talking about you. He told me just before leaving, and the next day the police knocked on the door. And I take it you listened to the old man instead of the police. You wouldn't get it. He said it in such a way that I had to comply. There was petrifying undertone in his voice. Dmitry comes home and realizes he's sick. It's probably because he got soaked in the rain, but there is a part of him that doubts it. Immobilized by fever, he lies on the bed and slips from a dream to reality and back. There is something in his bedroom. He can feel its presence. He can hear it breathing. But he's too ill to move and check what it is. Even after defeating the fever a few weeks later, he is sure that it wasn't just a dream. He wants to visit the agency again, but finds it closed by the police. After asking around in a nearby restaurant, he finds out that the owner was murdered. His body is missing, but the amount of blood at the scene eliminates any chances that he might be alive. Dmitry knows exactly what was stolen, the documents. Yet still, he isn't ready to call it quits. His life before this commission was boring and lonely. Now he has a purpose. He overhears the radio talking about how Houston, New Orleans and Dallas were completely wiped off the map by a hurricane. But other times it's talking about Mayan politics, as if the tribes, cults and conquistadors were fighting to this day. One day, Dmitry takes a walk through morning Moscow. Winter came for the Red Square, and its walls are now covered with a layer of snow. The fresh air is just what Dmitry needs to clear his head, but there is something that catches his attention. In front of Lenin's mausoleum, there seems to be a pyramid. Dmitry doesn't want to acknowledge his own insanity. He tries looking away, scratching his hand, pinching his skin, but it remains right there, next to St. Basil's Cathedral. If he wants to keep his mind, the Maya will have to go. All the books he collected over the past month are put in one stash in the hallway of the apartment. He doesn't have the heart to throw out literature. Maybe a curious neighbor will take some of the books. Dreams about human sacrifice eventually fade out, and Dmitry's life goes back to normal. He has bills to pay, so it's time to look for work. The Akaptsin translating agency is the exact opposite of his previous place. It's located in the 5th floor with modern furniture and a good-looking female manager instead of his presumably dead grumpy old boss. Unfortunately, all commissions in French and English are already taken. Dmitry is about to leave before the woman asks if he does Spanish. His heart skips a beat and his mouth moves on its own. The answer is yes. Dmitry feels embarrassed when the woman reveals that it's supposed to be some sort of a technical document. He comes home angry at himself. He was supposed to leave the Maya behind, and instead he still acts like a madman. He makes his tea and sits down to start translating the details of Spanish road construction. He opens the folder and sees a large header saying Capítulo 5. He is somehow just not surprised anymore. Letting out a sigh, he closes the folder, opens it again, closes it, opens it, walks to the kitchen and back, and sure enough, it's still there. the 5th chapter waiting specifically for him. Dmitry accepts his fate. The books are still in the hallway. No neighbor was interested in reading them except for the drafts of his translation. Those are for some reason missing. He starts translating. The expedition was struck by illness. Roughly a fifth came down with a fever, and in a week only 9 were left. The last guy they have left, Juan Cocom, begs the conquistador to take him under his protection, fearing he will be blamed for the disease and lynched by the Spaniards. As Juan comes to trust him, he reveals his theory about the purpose of their mission. According to native legends, the lost city should include an extraordinary relic, the Mayan Chronicles of Future. Dmitry notices that there is fresh blood soaked into the paper, and at that moment he hears the knocking. What I described in the intro ensues, and he catches a glimpse of the visitor through a peephole. It's a tall figure, way over 2 meters in height. It's wearing some sort of a coat, its head down as if it didn't want to reveal its face. Dmitry isn't scared, which surprises him. At this point he was anticipating something like this. He knows deep down that it's not a human. It looks, and more importantly, feels different than a human. There is a reflex you almost certainly build if you live alone in an apartment. When you come home, you lock the door, and then, perhaps before you go to sleep or when you pass by, you try turning the handle, just to make sure you're safe. Dmitry does precisely that, but to his horror, the door opens. It's not locked. He feels that a strong hand grabbed onto the other side. It takes him all his strength to close the door again, and now panicking, he continues to observe the monstrosity through the peephole. The worst thing is how it moves. Its motion is unnatural. Its steps make no sound. Dmitry tries to call the police, but no one answers. When he returns to the door, the entity is gone. In the morning, he finally gathers the courage to enter the hallway. A large Spanish text was carved into his door. It reads, "Knowledge is a curse." It goes beyond him what sort of sacred knowledge lies in the documents he's translating. But he knows that there isn't much time, especially after last night. He returns the 5th chapter to the agency where he finds the next part already waiting for him. The evenings in Moscow are not quiet. It's a cacophony of voices, sounds of car engines, barking of dogs. Yet, as Dmitry approaches his apartment door, he can make out a single, distinct sound amidst all the surrounding chaos. A bestial scream in the distance. From now on, he isn't racing just against time, but also against something otherworldly. He gets to translating, and sure enough, the same screaming is described in the book. Juan Cocom explains to the conquistador that it's the work of a powerful demon called the Human Jaguar. It means that the expedition finds itself on the White Road, a path on which one can only continue forward. One of the crew members can't handle the stress and tries turning back, only for his footsteps to be permanently silenced by the Human Jaguar. The Spanish diary blends into Dmitry's reality as the same demon is now waiting for him underneath the window. Its screams are so loud that they stop resembling an animal and start resembling a siren, bending the glass in the window frames. Dmitry is on a white road of his own. He can't turn back and stop translating, otherwise his life will end. One of the last remaining members of the expedition loses the ability to speak when passing by a pagan shrine. The only sound that comes from his mouth is that of a distressed animal. In the night, someone decides to kill him out of mercy. Juan Cocom tells the conquistador about his dreams. Now he is sure that the real purpose of the expedition is to find the chronicles of the future. These manuscripts are extremely important to the Maya, and the knowledge within is protected by gods, demons, and mortals alike. Said knowledge is cursed, and so are those who know of it. In the chronicle, among other things, lies the date on which the world will end. After finishing his work, Dmitry finds an old bill from the closed translating agency. He usually throws them out, but this one survived, tucked away in his pocket. He recognizes the handwriting on his presumably dead old boss. It reads, "They're after me." Probably my favorite part of the book is when Dmitry turns on the radio that night. There is a news show discussing the surge in natural disasters all around the world. Important geologists and directors are present in the studio, as well as the Minister of Emergency Situations. Now, if you don't know who held that ministry during the 2000s, then let's just say that it's a particularly unsettling entity. His real name better not be spoken, so the author refers to him as Sergei Shoigu. It's the surreal atmosphere of the scene. It's 4 in the morning. Why would such important people be talking live on the radio? The climatologist denies that these disasters could be a result of climate change. The geologist is also unable to clarify what's going on either. The minister assures that the Federation is prepared to handle any emergency, as well or even better than other countries. Dmitry thinks about how maybe the minister is in the same boat as him. What sort of a demon would keep him awake at this hour of the night? The host announces that the listeners can call into the studio and ask the minister questions. Dmitry goes in and asks Shoigu, Shoigu, a simple question. What if these natural disasters signal an apocalypse? And Shoigu replies, obviously the government is informed about the upcoming end of the world. At that moment, an earthquake hits Dmitry's apartment and knocks him unconscious. He is woken up by the voice of his neighbor, an older lady from the same floor. Dmitry Alexeyevich, are you home? Did the lights go out in your apartment as well? Was it an earthquake? How terrible. Dmitry gets up, shakes off the debris from his body and shouts back at the neighbor. She can't hear him though. Dmitry Alexeyevich, are you home? He rushes to the hallway, eager to hear a human voice. Yes, give me a second, Serafima Antonovna. She can be heard on the other side of the apartment door. Was it an earthquake? How terrible. Dmitry Alexeyevich, are you home? Of course I am. Dmitry raises his voice, annoyed with how deaf the lady next door seems to be. Did the lights go out in your apartment as well? Was it an earthquake? How terrible. He pauses and chooses not to touch the lock. Something isn't right. Dmitry Alexeyevich, are you home? The voice of his neighbor keeps repeating the same words. After a minute, it transitions from a voice back into that ear-piercing, siren-like screaming. The demon outside of the door is using sound as a form of siege warfare, trying to tear down Dmitry's psyche. After some time, the lights turn back on. The lady next door was murdered. Her ribcage was torn open and her heart removed. She was the one that took the translations from the book pile. Knowledge is a curse. Dmitry gets the next chapter and goes back to translating, ignoring the news on the radio which announced more deaths in Pakistan and Iran. The expedition finally arrives to the Forbidden City. It's anticlimactic in the sense that the pyramids really aren't that big. However, they are perfectly preserved. As the soldiers start looting the treasure, our conquistador gets knocked out from the behind. He wakes up being tied next to Juan Cocom. The monk and the other soldiers accuse him of plotting a betrayal with the guide he got attached to during the journey. They need Juan Cocom alive, but the conquistador is a different story. The chapter ends with him being thrown into a dry well, with no hope to make it out on his own. It's here that the book gets weird. The newspaper is full of headlines about earthquakes. Not just the one in Moscow Dmitry went through, but also in the rest of Europe. Dmitry thinks of how anticlimactic it all is. The four horsemen of the apocalypse didn't appear. Instead of a final struggle between good and evil, it was decided that the end of the world will carry itself in a distinctly postmodern spirit. It will be non-personal and meaningless. Dmitry is no longer pursued by the human jaguar or the knocking figure. Instead, something seems to be living in his odd antique mirror. The glass stopped reflecting images decades ago, but in the darkness of the apartment, it seems that something is moving inside of it. The newspaper announces that a new monument will be built over Moscow. An impossibly large building in the shape of a World War II L5 fighter. Its insides will be used for lecture halls that will span multiple square kilometers in size. In other news, a dead puppet master will have her own museum opened as a tribute. The multiple-story tall building will include her mausoleum as well as an exhibition of every little aspect of her life. But more than any of the nonsense surrounding Dmitry, what worries him the most is that the translating agency seemingly disappeared. Only now he realizes that it was located on the 5th floor of a 4-story building. As he is checking the companies listed in the lobby, he notices that an older gentleman is doing the same. A small piece of paper falls out of the old man's bag before he leaves. On it is written simply, "It's Omni Street 23. He tries to follow the man, but to no avail. Instead, destiny leads him back to his old translating agency. He takes a deep breath, removes the police seal, and enters the building. There, waiting for him, is the last chapter. There he reads about how the conquistador spent several days slowly dying in the well. But on the 4th day, someone came to his rescue. It's none other than Juan Cocom, the native guide. He managed to escape captivity with the help of a tribe tasked with protecting the chronicle of future. The tribe leader sits down with the conquistador and explains the nature of the curse. The Maya have predicted their own doomsday. On the day the world was supposed to end, they abandoned their cities and scattered back into the forests. The apocalypse didn't arrive. The sun rose again in the morning. But the civilization that predicted its own downfall truly fell. The issue wasn't with the prophecy itself. it was with the math. They miscalculated when the final days would come. Neither humans nor gods have the right to try and predict the exact date. It will come eventually, when Itzamna, the god that dreamed the world into reality, dies. But there is nothing to gain in trying to guess when that might be, and much to lose. The tribe leader decides that the conquistador will inherit this knowledge. Not only because there are no direct heirs, but also because the Maya are on the verge of extinction. The curse will now continue to live in the hand of the Spaniard. And in the same way, it's now Dmitry who will inherit this curse. Amidst news of earthquakes and human sacrifices in Moscow, he is given a message by a detective who was investigating the death of his neighbor. They are supposed to meet in a park that night, that is if Dmitry wants back the lost chapter of the translation. Once he arrives, he sees a figure standing underneath a street lamp. He is immediately unsettled by its movement. It twists its legs in unnatural ways, and once it notices him, it seems to almost float in the air for a couple seconds. It raises its hand in a strange motion that Dmitry interprets as a signal that he should approach the stranger. Dmitry almost throws up when he recognizes who it is. It's the investigator. Except now there is a large hole in his chest hiding underneath a jacket. His tissue doesn't look normal. He seems staffed, like an animal trophy. And worst of all, he seems to have been transformed into a puppet hanging by tiny threads from the top of the street lamp. The human puppet gives him a bag with the lost chapter, and Dmitry rushes home. For the first time in years, he gets completely drunk and blacks out. A dream reveals to him that there is a gate in a street he passes through every week. When he wakes up with a brutal hangover, he's prepared to finally figure out what should have been obvious from the start. He goes to the location from his dream, and sure enough, there is a gate. He opens it and the street name sign reveals that this is Itzamni. Dmitry can't believe it. He lived here his entire life, yet never noticed the street. The architecture is particularly interesting. The street starts with Stalincas from the 50s, but slowly morphs in time and space until it reaches a block of colonial-style buildings. And at the end of all that, there is the museum. A museum of the puppet mistress Dmitry heard about in the news. It's larger than Pushkin's museum or any other memorial in Russia. Inside he finds exhibits of every little aspect of the woman's life. Stuffed people are exhibited as puppets in dioramas of lifelike proportions. There is one specific section that catches Dmitry's interest. One dedicated to her husband, Yurin Knorosov. His part of the museum is lined with Mayan relics, pyramids, idols and shrines. Dmitry continues through the hallway, then an impossibly long elevator ride until he finally reaches a door resembling a doctor's office. On that door there is a simple sign that reads God. Dmitry finally meets with the old man who was commissioning him all this time. The same man he met at the agency that never existed. He introduces himself as Yuri Andreevich Knorosov. Without knowing it, Dmitry was indirectly encountering him every day. I didn't want to bother you throughout the video with every little detail, otherwise it would take way too long. However, what might seem like a book full of long inner monologues and newspaper commentary on unimportant topics is actually carefully crafted setup. In one of the earlier chapters, Dmitry takes interest in the fact that Miss Universe was won by a 30-year-old Russian. And while she is pretty, she is certainly not Miss Universe. Yet as he talks to Yuri in his room, which resembles a hospital cell, their conversation gradually shifts to all the photos on the wall. The most beautiful woman on earth is Knorosov's daughter. When Dmitry gives him a compliment that she isn't just the most beautiful in her father's eyes but in the eyes of the entire universe, Yuri declares that there really isn't a difference between the two. Dmitry slowly pieces together that Yuri really is something more. The enormous museum was opened to pay tribute to his late wife. And the enormous surreal L5 fighter plane being built over Moscow, that's a result of his obsession because he is a veteran of the Great Patriotic War. Still, he doesn't want to believe that Yuri is God. It's just not right. Not only because it's healthy to doubt someone's godhood, also because he isn't qualified for the position. How anticlimactic would it be for this old man to be God? For this to be the end and the beginning of Dmitry's journey. Yuri has a simple argument to why he is God. Why else would there be a pyramid on the Red Square? Dmitry finds it ridiculous. That's not a pyramid, that's the mausoleum of Lenin. And then he stops because the memory of what he thought is a hallucination is still too vivid. Yuri had a lifelong interest in the Maya. He learned Spanish, traveled to Yucatan and helped with research. and since they were so important to him, they will be important to the world as well. But here's the kicker. As far as Yuri knows, he is God only to this world. In the world he was born in, he is in Moscow hospital, dying of brain cancer. Every complication with his tumor results in an earthquake, because he can't control this world that he himself dreamt into reality. It's a fever dream. He might be the creator, but he can't control anything. His surroundings are a prison built by his own subconscious. But Dmitry might be a key to the cell. Due to his illness, he forgot how to speak Spanish and now relies on the translator to save him. But how can Dmitry save God? He thinks about how so many people go around thinking that everything is a mere product of their mind. But what if the world is happening in someone else's head? With so many deities worshipped all around the world, who can fully rule out the possibility that the creator of the universe is a dying man in Moscow? So he reveals to Yuri the final episode of the translation. And at first, Yuri doesn't get it. For Dmitry, the message was clear. The apocalypse is in sight and Yuri will die. But it's pointless to try and guess when that might happen. A man who knows his death date is exactly like a death row inmate, and his only purpose becomes waiting for the execution. It's better not to worry about the day of one's demise and instead dedicate all energy to one's life. Yuri has trouble accepting. People have always sought to extend their own life, even if it means being tied to a hospital bed. But there really is nothing else to do. There are no more miracles and no way to tell if he has weeks or mere minutes left. All that can be done is to just keep living until he dies. Anticlimactic is the end of Yuri's and Dmitry's journey. And anticlimactic is the correct word to describe death of old age. If you remember, Dmitry still didn't get to read the first chapter. Since Yuri has no more use for it, it ends up in his hands. There is much peace to be found in the inevitability of the end. And in a similar way, there is hope to be found in its unpredictability. Hope is the reason a man keeps on living. It's in his nature that even on the eve of apocalypse, he will keep on hoping. But those who try and predict their own downfall curse themselves. To fully grasp this, I was sent by the Almighty to an expedition to Yucatan, which I will describe below. Well, and that's the book. While I do think that the main message is pretty clear, the book quite literally spells it out for you, there is still much to talk about. First up, you have to take in consideration that back when this was written, the Mayan end of the world was still a hot topic. This micro-genre of books disappeared after 2012 because, surprise, the world didn't end. Which is amazing, so many good things happened since 2012, like the white guy speaks fluent Somali video. The quote-unquote god in the book, Yuri Andreevich Knorozov, is very obviously based on Yuri Valentinovich Knorozov. He was a key player in deciphering the Mayan language and was an overall interesting personality. He also really liked cats. This is not the only real person that gets transported into the book. Obviously, there is Shoigu, and most importantly, Dmitry, the main character, is a sort of less successful and, I think at the time, older version of the author, Dmitry Glukhovsky. Now, it goes without saying that Glukhovsky has never been afraid to be political. This goes even beyond his books. However, I don't think that Sumерки is quite on the level of Metro 2033. If you haven't read Metro, it's a very smart way of inserting certain political themes into sci-fi. Because in that book you have all the classes of Russia stuck in one metro, and they are trying to shape each of the stations according to their worldview. And at the same time you have the outside forces, the entities outside of the metro system, which also carry a strong symbolism. Me being a fan of Glukhovsky doesn't mean I necessarily agree with him on everything, I hope that goes without saying. So while I can't see inside of his head obviously, I do think that there is some political messaging in Sumерki as well. I love the part in which Dmitry learns about the mega project. Especially the L5 fighter plane of impossible proportions that will cast shadow over all of Moscow. It reinforces the absurdness of Dmitry's world. When you reach the final chapters, you realize that so many things going on were the way they are because of Yuri. Everyone is living in Yuri's world, and an important part of Yuri is his age. Dmitry has this inner monologue about how aging is a slow death, and the world is dying with you. As people and things you're attached to disappear, more and more of your world is being made up of memories. And Russia is a very old country. This is an issue for most of Europe. When you have so many old people, you risk building your world on memories of senior citizens. There is a small detail that I want to highlight because I think it could be interesting to my Western audience. A lot of men in Eastern Europe, older than 50, really like Native Americans. A huge part of those generations that grew up during the socialist era spent their entire childhood obsessing over Native Americans. Obviously, they were portrayed in their romanticized version, often inaccurate, but the craze was real and many boys spent their free time role-playing Native Americans in the forest. It wasn't just children, politicians and most importantly, scientists took also a huge interest. You get a nice example of this through Yuri in the book. What I personally like about Sumерки is the horror part. That's what I remember the most vividly from back when I read it as a kid. I really like that not every entity which pays him a visit tries to kill him. His apartment is under siege every night and so is his psyche. The presence in his bedroom, the tall figure and the human jaguar aren't the traditional demons you see in other horror. They didn't come just to kill him. In some cases their purpose remains shrouded in mystery. Since there isn't one creature haunting Dmitry, the author doesn't have to play his cards. He doesn't have to reveal the creature, just give it one night and then we move on with the plot. For me, the setting of an old socialist apartment is very relatable. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe I was haunted by one, who also happened to be a sexual deviant. This doesn't have anything to do with the book because Dmitry lives in a Stalinka and this was in a more normal apartment block. But whatever, this is my channel. So it was a rainy autumn and I just moved in. Problem was there was no heating in the flat. It used to be there, but the landlord decided to save money and remove it. So after a couple of miserable nights in the bedroom, I decided to move to the sofa because it was closer to a wall and easier to keep warm. And as I was going to sleep, I heard this loud It was really close to bed and I wasn't sleepy enough for it to be a hallucination, so I got scared shitless. And from that point onward, I started fighting this white layer of just stuff in the apartment and it really looked like ejaculate. And I just think that those noises that I was hearing at night were orgasms of some sort of a ghost. And while I'm sure that there is some sort of a logical explanation for why my flat was full of ghost cum and there were these orgasm sounds at night, which mind you were not my neighbors, but there is a non-zero chance that there really was a gooner ghost haunting my apartment. And I thought I'm gonna make this into a book and it's gonna be called He Who Got Erected from His Grave. Another thing I really like about Sumерki is the concept of a non-personal end of the world. Because make no mistake, this is how the world would end. All the news about earthquakes and hurricanes are just noise coming through the radio. You don't really feel the tragedy when it's just a death count presented in the news. Last but not least, Dmitry is a good protagonist. There is a moment in the book where he explains, or rather doesn't explain, why he can't go back to his old, boring, lonely life. He says that it's a long story and it would require him to go deep into his history, which he doesn't want to do. So instead, you get to meet him through his daily life. It's what he has for breakfast or how he talks to people that paints a picture of a fundamentally broken man. Overall, I wouldn't say it's Glukhovsky's best work. Future, Text, the Metro series, I consider those to be better books. But Sumерки is my personal favorite. If not for anything else, then because I never looked at Lenin's mausoleum in the same way ever again. Comrade, where are we going to bury our leader? Fuck it, let's build him a pyramid, it would be funny.